was gonna buy you a diamond ring.
Hey everybody, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Amanda, and welcome to Blood and Black Lace, where we discuss what nightmares are truly made of.
Tonight, in episode 3, we are discussing the tale of Miss Mercy Brown, whose claim to fame is being the Rhode Island Vampire.
And we're not talking about Twilight here, folks.
Not at all. These vampires don't sparkle. Think about this for a second. It's 19th century northern United States, Rhode Island to be exact. Many Americans at this time believed that the undead walked alongside us, feeding on the blood of the living. One disease that was prominent at that time was tuberculosis, which is caused by bacteria. Tuberculosis, also known as consumption or TB, affects the lungs and is lethal if not treated. The disease is spread through the air when an infected person coughs, allowing the bacteria to travel to other people. TB was sweeping great parts of the United States. In fact, many hospitals and asylums were overrun with patients suffering from the usually fatal disease, which would cause those who contracted the disease to experience chronic coughing, fever, blood in the mucus, and significant weight loss.
The weight loss was significant enough to look as if the life was being slowly sucked out of the patient.
This was a time in the U.S. where medically, we just weren't up to par. Unfortunately, that meant that sometimes people were misdiagnosed and died. This also meant that mass panic became the norm.
Consumption drove people to hysteria. People believed this disease was the work of vampires. People in these times went as far as to put rituals into place to ward off vampires, some placing garlic near their doorways, and other rituals included more extreme and monstrous methods.
Almost 2 decades after the infamous Salem witch trials, New England was in a frenzy over the apparent vampires returning from their graves. Sadly, this frenzy caused many innocent people, as seen in the Salem witch trials, to die at the hands of those who just didn't understand.
Back in the 1880s, one family would become infamous for being the focus of a true vampire hunt. George and Mary Brown had settled into the Exeter area with their children in the 1870s, buying a farm in the town of Exeter. There is no reason to suspect that the Browns were anything but a normal family of that era.
In 1883, the matriarch of the family, Mary, fell ill with tuberculosis and quickly died. The eldest daughter, Mary Olive, who was 20 years old at the time, died from TB in 1888. Tragically, the son Edwin became ill in 1890, but he didn't immediately die.
Instead, Edwin was sent to Colorado Springs in hopes that better climate would cure him. When Edwin returned 10 years later, his sister, Mercy Lena Brown, was on the verge of death and died in January of 1892. She was 19 years old.
With 3 deaths, the villagers were suspicious and weren't convinced that it was just a coincidence. In March of the same year, the villagers decided to exhume the 3 Brown family members who had died and see if one of them was responsible for the ill fate of the family.
The villagers were concerned, and rightfully so. So 9 weeks after Mercy died, a group of men and the local doctor dug up the coffins of Mom Mary and her daughter Mary Olive. When the caskets were opened, it revealed that the bodies had decayed over time.
However, since Mercy's body had not been buried due to the cold weather of the Rhode Island winter and frozen ground, Mercy's coffin was stored above ground with the intention of being buried once the ground had thawed. As this was custom with other people who died during the freezing temperatures back in that day.
Upon opening Mercy's coffin, the onlookers were shocked to see that Mercy's body was in pristine condition. Hell, some sources even say her body was not in the same position it had been when they buried her. Her fingernails and hair had grown significantly. There was no decay. Upon further examination, liquid blood was found in her heart and liver. It was quickly concluded that Mercy was a vampire, and that she was the reason for Edwin's lingering disease.
Even though the doctor assured those present that Mercy Brown's preserved state was not unusual, particularly because she had been buried in the cold winter months, George Brown had his daughter's body removed from the casket. Her heart and liver were removed and burned by superstitious locals before she was reburied.
Once the heart and liver were nothing but ashes, the ashes were combined with water and then given to Edwin to drink.
The belief was that the ashes from a vampire's heart could cure someone. However, 2 months later, Edwin died.
It was at this point that many of the villagers had heard of the Mercy Brown vampire. They claimed to have seen Mercy walking through the graveyard and neighboring fields at night.
Mercy Brown is buried in Chestnut Hill Cemetery. The Brown family graves are located by a tree to the left of the main path. If you decide to pay your respects to Mercy Brown, be sure not to come empty-handed. Mercy's grave often has trinkets and offerings that have been left around it. You'll also notice that her headstone is secured by a metal device to prevent theft. On the east side of the cemetery, there's a stone structure that supposedly held Mercy's body until the spring when the ground thawed and a grave could be dug. The entrance is now bricked up.
It has been said that the shocking way Mercy Brown's corpse was treated was the inspiration for Lucy Westrina, a character from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Eerily, there was another girl from West Greenwich, Rhode Island, which is about 10 miles away, Nellie Vaughan, who is believed to have been a vampire. People would say that grass and other plants wouldn't grow over her grave.
And the coffin and ground itself is sinking deeper into the earth. Nellie's tombstone was engraved with the saying, "I am waiting and watching for you."
Nellie died at the same age as Mercy Brown, 19. However, Nellie died of pneumonia.
At first, Nellie was buried at her family farm. That is, until her mother got permission to move Nellie's remains to a plot in a public cemetery.
So how did poor Nellie get accused of being a vampire? It's likely that her body being moved inspired the legend around Nellie. As the story goes, a high school teacher told their students about the Mercy Brown vampire incident, without giving out any names or places. When the children set out to find the gravesite that matched the few details they had, they stumbled upon poor Nellie's grave.
So, was Nellie a blood-sucking, undead monster? Or was this just a case of mistaken identity?
Just think, in 150 years, we've gone from being absolutely terrified of vampires to Hollywood glamorizing them, thanks to movies such as Interview with the Vampire, Twilight, and Dracula.
Well, New Orleans has become an epicenter of vampire activity over the years. With vampire tours and vampire clubs, it's no wonder people flock to the French Quarter looking for a glimpse into the supernatural.
And remember, if you decide to head to New Orleans, be mindful of your surroundings. You never know what might be lurking in the dark. So, as we're sitting here riffing, I was actually researching something, and it says roughly between 1790 and 1899, at least a dozen bodies were exhumed in New England because family members and neighbors suspected them of being vampires. When I think of Mercy
How
Brown,
did they I didn't mean to cut you off. How did they test you to see if you were a vampire? Like, because her liver and her heart were still full.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's people were so afraid back then of the unknown that they could not understand why everything was still growing. I mean, we know now from science that, you know, when somebody dies, their hair will still grow afterwards. Their nails still grow afterwards. After a while, I mean, they embalm you, so obviously, you know, the blood stops flowing and everything. But blood stops flowing once the moment your heart stops, and blood kind of ends up settling. But I fully believe that these people weren't meaning any harm. They were afraid of things that they didn't know, and they didn't know a lot about, you know, consumption, tuberculosis, TB, whatever you want to call it. They didn't know a lot about it because we weren't medically advanced. And so it scared them. I mean, to this day, people are still scared of the unknown, which is why we do this podcast, because there's so much unknown out there and people are so afraid of it. I mean, I try to embrace the unknown because sure, it can bring bad things to you, but it can also bring really good things. And you can't live your life, you know, hiding from the unknown. So embrace it.
Oh, I agree, absolutely. The curiosity of the afterlife has been something I've kind of been researching a little bit. And I do want to do a podcast on this. And there have been many doctors and many people that have done this, but basically put you to sleep and make your heart stop and let you die for, 5 to 7 minutes, whatever it takes, bring you back if you do come back. And then, try to go back. Well, what did you see? Did you see a light? Did you see your family? What did you see in the afterlife? Well, a lot of these patients end up dying. You can't bring them back. Or
I was going to say, you had me up until you might come back. I was like, wait, what? What do you mean, might?
If they did come back, they had severe brain damage from lack of oxygen. But the ones that, like the little boy that apparently passed away and saw his grandfather and came back, told his parents, they wrote a book about it, and bam, he's a millionaire. Is that real? Did he really see someone, or is he, just being a child making things up in his head? We don't know. And that is just, it is so impressive to me. I don't want to be on that table dying for 5 minutes to see. When it's my time, I'll figure it out. But to me, that's just crazy. The experimental things that have gone on in history, it just fascinates me what we do to our own kind, to the experimental drugs, the electroshock therapy, the lobotomies. I could go on and on and on.
Don't forget about clitoral stimulation for an orgasm to get rid of hysteria.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's true. Like when a woman went to see a doctor and she was complaining of, being, hysteria. I mean, I can't even describe the device that they used, but it was god awful looking, very scary looking device that the doctor would make the woman have an orgasm right there on the table or the couch, and she would be cured because she had an orgasm. I mean,
well, sign me up, please.
Right? Like, it's just, you think
That's
about
just
it.
baffling. Who thought of that? Let's bring a woman in here and just see what happens and see if it cures her. Like, it's like that warning label, on the hair dryer, don't put this in the bathtub while it's plugged up while you're in there. Okay, well, that label didn't just land on there. Someone actually did that.
Yeah, I actually have an old curling iron that it says, do not stick into any orifice. Okay, who did that in the first place and why? I've always said that they should take warning labels off of things and just let the problem sort itself out. How do we get talking from vampires to orgasms?
No.
Well, this is going to be one hell of a podcast episode.
Wow. I think we veered way off into left field there.
But I think it's amazing, and I think Brian should keep it.
As always, friends, we're wishing you unpleasant dreams. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Lindsay, and we will catch you next time when we discuss Pennhurst Asylum in Pennsylvania on Blood and Black Lace.